March 44 BC, 60 people knew exactly what was going to happen. Not suspected, knew. The date, the place, the plan. For months, they went to dinners, sat in the Senate, made small talk with the man they were about to kill, and not one of them said a word. That was a masterclass in planning, but here's the thing. The moment the assassination was over, everything collapsed. Not over weeks, not gradually, days. The same people who had kept a secret from the most powerful man in Rome for months couldn't hold on to power for a single week. That was their real failure. 3 men were at the center of it, and 57 others. That history barely mentions, right? Even though without them, none of it would have worked. Cassius started building his network almost 2 years before the murder. He was careful about it. Dinners, private conversations, the kind of question you drop casually and then just listen. Where do you think the Republic is actually headed? Anyone who got evasive or changed the subject got quietly crossed off the list. He was looking for a specific type of person. Men who had already hit their ceiling under Caesar. They had their rank, their office, their record of service, and they'd figured out it didn't matter anymore because every appointment now ran through one man. Your place in Roman society depended on Caesar's mood, his preferences, his political needs at any given moment. You had no real say in any of it. Cassius was a perfect example of this himself. He was a brilliant military commander, fought, won, and had every reason to expect a consulship, the highest elected office in Rome. That would have been the natural end to a career like his. Instead, Caesar gave the consulship to Brutus, a man who had literally fought against him in the Civil War. Cassius got a lower post. Formally, still an honor. In practice, a very public message. You're good, just not that good. And you never will be, as long as I'm the one deciding. Cassius swallowed it. But he didn't forget. Brutus is more complicated and more interesting. Because unlike Cassius, he didn't have an obvious personal grievance. It was actually the opposite. Caesar treated Brutus like a son, not a figure of speech. He literally talked about him that way. When the Civil War broke out, Brutus had backed the wrong side and fought against Caesar. Caesar won, and his personal order was to find Brutus alive. Not execute him, not arrest him, find him alive. Then he forgave him, gave him one of the best positions in Rome, gave him a wealthy province to govern, and put him on the shortlist for future consulships. By any reasonable measure, Brutus was one of the winners. Caesar loved him, trusted him, promoted him. So what was the problem? To understand that, you have to understand who Brutus believed he was. He was a Stoic philosopher, not in the sense of reading the right books, but in the sense that this was his actual identity. A man of principle, a man of Republican values, and a direct descendant of Lucius Junius Brutus, the man who 500 years earlier had expelled the last king of Rome and founded the Republic. In Rome, that name wasn't just a family name, it was a political statement. And this man went to work for a dictator every single day, accepted his promotions, smiled at his dinners, gave speeches in a Senate that hadn't made a real decision in years. And somewhere underneath all of it, he knew exactly what he'd become, a decorative piece of the regime, living proof that Caesar was so magnanimous, he could forgive even his enemies and raise them up. That kind of contradiction doesn't hit all at once. It builds quietly, like pressure with nowhere to go. Cassius understood that and played it carefully. He didn't say, "Let's kill Caesar." He said things like, "Do you understand what's happening to the Republic? Do you understand that your silence is also a choice, that every day you accept his gifts and say nothing, you're making a choice?" And then anonymous notes started appearing in the forum, near the statues of Brutus's ancestors, near his praetor's chair. "Are you asleep, Brutus? Wake up, Brutus. Are you even the Brutus you think you are?" Who left them? No one knows. Maybe Cassius's people, maybe others who were simply waiting for him to move. But the effect was precise, because this was no longer a private conversation over dinner. Now it was a public challenge to his identity. And for a man whose entire sense of self rested on being a man of principle, that was unbearable. Not out of fear, but because if he didn't answer it with action, he was no longer Brutus, no longer worthy of the name. Decimus is not Marcus Brutus. Completely different person. and he usually stays in the shadows of this story. That's a mistake. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus was one of Caesar's closest men. Not just an ally, a genuine insider. He could walk into Caesar's house unannounced. He commanded part of Caesar's fleet during the Gallic Wars. Caesar named him in his will as a backup heir, in case the primary heir Octavian didn't survive to inherit. On paper, this was a man with nothing to gain and everything to lose. By any normal standard, he had everything. Except, backup heir is just a polished way of saying second. As long as Caesar was alive, Decimus was one trusted man among several. Ahead of him stood Octavian as heir, Antony as Caesar's right hand, Lepidus as a key ally. In that hierarchy, Decimus was never going to be first. Good life, strong career, but the same ceiling as everyone else who wasn't Caesar. And the idea seems to have taken shape in his mind that Caesar's death was the only way to the kind of power he believed he deserved. That's why on the morning of March 15th, it was Decimus who showed up at Caesar's door. Caesar had already been considering staying home. His wife had spent the whole night screaming in her sleep, convinced something terrible was coming, and that morning she begged him not to go. A messenger had already been sent to postpone the Senate session. Then Decimus arrived. He sat with Caesar, heard out the dreams and the omens, and then, calmly, no pressure, said something to the effect of, "Come on, the senators are waiting. Important men. It'll look bad if you cancel. You're really going to stay home because of a dream? Let's go, I'll walk with you." Caesar laughed, stood up, and went, because it was Decimus, a man he trusted. And Decimus walked him straight into that building. Without that moment, the whole thing might have fallen apart. Because once dozens of people take part in a killing, it stops looking like murder. It starts to look like a verdict. Try finding one man to blame when everyone had a knife in him. Those 60 conspirators were like signatures on a document. The more people involved, the harder it became to punish any one of them afterward. And every one of them had his own version of the story. His own grievance, his own missed promotion, his own moment when Caesar had made it clear that his future had a ceiling. Cassius just knew how to find them. They expected one thing, that Rome would breathe a sigh of relief, that people would pour into the streets and say, finally, the Republic is restored, the tyranny is over, and the names of the conspirators would go down in history as liberators. That did not happen. At Caesar's funeral, Antony turned to the crowd. Then he gave them Caesar's will, money for Roman citizens, and his private gardens left to the public. The crowd listened, looked at the body, and erupted. Within weeks, the men who had expected congratulations were leaving Rome. They had killed the man. But they had not killed what he had built. Brutus and Cassius fought on for 2 more years, raising armies across the eastern provinces until they were defeated at Philippi. Cassius ordered a slave to run him through. Brutus fell on his own sword. Decimus did not even make it that far. He was captured and executed a year earlier. 60 men, a perfect conspiracy, a flawless assassination, and total collapse, because they thought removing the man would be enough. But Caesar was no longer just a man, he was an order, and orders outlive the people who create them. Caesar was dead. The Caesars were just getting started.